April 1945. The war in Europe is almost over, but the most important decision of the entire campaign is still ahead. American tanks are racing across Germany, bridges are falling, cities are collapsing, and somewhere east, Berlin is burning under Soviet artillery. General George S. Patton is convinced of one thing. If he is allowed to keep moving, he can reach Berlin before the Red Army. His tanks are fueled. His men are aggressive. The road looks open. Then suddenly, the order comes down. Stop. Hold your position. Do not advance east. That single command, delivered quietly through headquarters, will shape the next 40 years of world history. This is the story of why President Dwight D. Eisenhower halted Patton at the Elbe River, and how that decision allowed Joseph Stalin to... If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below. To take Berlin. To understand this moment, we have to rewind just a few months earlier. In December 1944, Germany launches its last major offensive in the West, the Battle of the Bulge. Adolf Hitler throws his remaining armoured reserves into the Ardennes, hoping to split the Allied armies and force a negotiated peace. The plan fails. By January 1945, the German army is shattered beyond repair. Fuel is gone. Air cover is gone. Experienced officers are gone. The Western Allies now face little organised resistance as they push toward the heart of Germany. By March 1945, American, British and Canadian forces are advancing fast. On March 7, 1945, the US First Army captures the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen intact. It is a shock to the German High Command. The Allies now have a solid bridgehead east of the Rhine, something Hitler swore would never happen. Within days, thousands of American troops pour across the river. General Omar Bradley commands the US 12th Army Group, which includes General Courtney Hodges's First Army and General George S. Patton's Third Army. Patton is moving faster than anyone else. By late March, his Third Army crosses the Rhine near Oppenheim. Once across, Patton does what he does best. He drives hard, ignores flanks, and keeps moving forward. His armoured divisions cover huge distances every day. German resistance collapses as American columns move through central Germany, capturing city after city. Frankfurt falls. Kassel falls. Weimar falls. The German army is no longer fighting a coordinated defence. It is breaking apart. By early April, Patton's forces are approaching the Elbe River. This river is not just a geographic feature, it is a political line agreed upon months earlier by the Allied leaders. According to agreements made with the Soviet Union, the Elbe marks the boundary between American and Soviet zones of advance. Everything east of it, including Berlin, is assigned to the Red Army. Patton knows this. He also believes it is a mistake. Patton is not just a battlefield commander. He is a student of history. He understands power. He understands that whoever takes Berlin will shape the future of Europe. He believes deeply that the Soviets are not true allies, but future enemies. As early as 1944, Patton is writing in his diary that the United States will one day fight the Soviet Union. To him, Berlin is not just a city, it is the prize. On April 11, 1945, elements of the US 9th Armored Division reach the Elbe River near the town of Magdeburg. Just a few miles east, Soviet forces are pushing westward. The gap between the two armies is shrinking fast. Patton believes his Third Army, which is south of Magdeburg, could swing north and race for Berlin. His tanks are closer than many Soviet units. German defences around Berlin are weak. Patton believes he could be there in days. But Patton does not command the war. Eisenhower does. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, is facing a very different picture. Eisenhower is not thinking only about Berlin. He is thinking about the entire alliance. He is thinking about logistics, casualties, and political agreements made long before. Patton crossed the Rhine. The most important of those agreements is the Yalta Conference. In February 1945, Roosevelt, Churchill and Stalin meet in Yalta, Crimea. At Yalta, they agree on post-war occupation zones for Germany. Berlin, deep inside the Soviet zone, will be jointly occupied, but captured by the Red Army. Eisenhower understands that breaking this agreement could shatter Allied unity at the exact moment a victory is within reach. There is also another concern. Intelligence reports in March and April 1945 suggest that large German forces are still active in southern Germany and Austria. There are fears of a last stand in the Alpine region, known as the National Redoubt. The idea is that Nazi leaders could retreat into the mountains and continue fighting. Eisenhower believes his priority should be to destroy all remaining German forces, not to race the Soviets to a symbolic capital. Casualties matter too. Berlin is a massive city, heavily defended, even with German forces weakened. Street fighting would be brutal. Eisenhower estimates that taking Berlin could cost 100,000 Allied casualties. He does not believe those losses are justified for a city that will be handed over to the Soviets anyway. On March 28, 1945, Eisenhower makes his decision. He informs the combined chiefs of staff that the Western Allies will not advance on Berlin. Instead, they will push south and east to link up with Soviet forces and cut Germany in half. The main effort will be toward Leipzig and Dresden, not Berlin. This decision is communicated down the chain of command. Patton is furious. In his diary, Patton writes that stopping at the Elbe is one of the greatest mistakes of the war. He believes the United States is handing Eastern Europe to Stalin on a silver platter. He cannot understand why American soldiers should stop when the enemy is broken and the road is open. Patton is not alone. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill is deeply concerned. Churchill argues strongly for an advance on Berlin. He believes the Western Allies should occupy as much territory as possible before the Soviets arrive. But Churchill does not command American armies. Eisenhower does. By April 12, 1945, President Franklin D. Roosevelt dies suddenly. Vice President Harry S. Truman becomes president. Truman is new, overwhelmed, and heavily reliant on military advice. Eisenhower's decision stands. On April 16, 1945, the Soviet offensive against Berlin begins. Over 2.5 million Red Army soldiers, supported by thousands of tanks and artillery pieces, smash into German defences along the Elbe River. The fighting is savage. Soviet casualties are enormous. Entire divisions are thrown into the battle. Stalin wants Berlin at all costs, and he is willing to pay for it in blood. While Berlin burns, American troops reach the Elbe. On April 25, 1945, US and Soviet soldiers meet near the town of Torgau. The famous handshake on the Elbe symbolizes the defeat of Nazi Germany, but it also marks the beginning of a new division. Patton's Third Army is now just a few dozen miles from Berlin. His tanks idle. His soldiers listen to the distant thunder of Soviet guns. They know the war is ending, but they also know they are not allowed to go any further. On April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler commits suicide in his bunker beneath Berlin. On May 2nd, the city surrenders to Soviet forces. The Red Army raises its flag over the Reichstag. Berlin is theirs. Germany surrenders unconditionally on May 7, 1945. The war in Europe is over, but the consequences of Eisenhower's decision are only beginning. Because the Western Allies stopped at the Elbe, the Soviet Union occupies all of eastern Germany, including Berlin. Over the next months, Soviet authorities consolidate control. Political opponents disappear. Industries are dismantled and shipped east. Communist governments are installed across Eastern Europe. By 1949, Germany is divided into two states: the Federal Republic of Germany in the west, aligned with the United States and its allies, and the German Democratic Republic in the east, controlled by the Soviet Union. Berlin itself is split. In 1961, the Berlin Wall goes up, turning the city into the most dangerous symbol of the Cold War. Many later historians ask the same question. What if Eisenhower had let Patton go? What if American tanks had reached Berlin first? The honest answer is complicated. Militarily, it was possible. Patton's forces were fast and aggressive. German resistance between the Elbe and Berlin was limited. The Red Army was still fighting its way through strong defences east of the city. There is a real chance that US forces could have reached Berlin first, or at least entered it alongside the Soviets. Politically, however, the consequences could have been severe. Breaking the Yalta agreements might have caused Stalin to halt cooperation altogether. The war against Japan was still ongoing. The United States needed Soviet support, or at least neutrality, in the Pacific. There was also the risk of accidental clashes between American and Soviet troops, which could have turned victory into disaster. Eisenhower was not blind to the danger of Soviet expansion, but he believed the unity of the alliance and the quick end of the war were more important than a race for Berlin. Patton never accepted that logic. In the months after the war, Patton becomes more outspoken. He criticizes denazification policies. He speaks openly about the Soviet threat. In October 1945, he dies in a car accident in Germany. To this day, some believe his warnings were ignored too easily. Eisenhower, on the other hand, goes on to become President of the United States. As President, he faces the very Cold War he tried to avoid in 1945. NATO is formed. The Iron Curtain descends across Europe. Berlin becomes the front line of a divided world. Looking back, the order to halt at the Elbe was not cowardice, and it was not betrayal. It was a calculated decision made under immense pressure, with limited information and enormous risks on every side. Eisenhower chose certainty over ambition. He chose agreements over impulse. He chose to end one war cleanly, even if it meant setting the stage for another kind of conflict. And Patton, standing on the banks of the Elbe in April 1945, watching history slip away, understood something that would become clear only years later. The war against Nazi Germany was ending, but the struggle for Europe was just beginning. That single order, given quietly in a headquarters far from the front lines, did not just decide who captured a city. It decided who would shape half a continent. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.